So Joel, how does Job react to his friends after Eliphaz makes this pitch to him?
So there's a sense of, what I read is a clear sense of frustration. You know, he's lost everything. He's sitting there in pain and grieving. And really the last thing he wants or needs is people coming to him and lecturing him. You know, when I teach Job, one of the things that I do is I say, look, this book is a pretty excellent illustration of how not to help somebody who's grieving, right? There's lots of things that you can say to somebody who's grieving. Many of them are wrong, right? Very often what they need is someone to just sit quietly and be supportive and say, I'm with you and how can I help? And it's always terrible when somebody comes and says, well, here's how to make things better, or here's probably how things went wrong. And really
What
that's...
you should have done.
Yeah, and that's almost all that his friends do. And I mean, you mentioned that it begins politely, but it's not too long before it becomes sort of increasingly aggressive, right? As Job sort of is reticent to play their game, and they become just deeply, why would you not fix this?
Yep.
You know, seems to be
when,
their attitude.
When Bildad weighs in, how long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind?
Right.
So now, for Bildad, the key question is, does God pervert justice? This, I think, is one of the key questions of the book, and something we need to come back and reflect on at the end of it. I mean, he does so to a much greater degree than Bildad is willing to allow.
You're right. I mean, and so again, this is another situation where what the friend says seems not unreasonable. It appeals to that sort of conventional wisdom, but we, the readers, who are privy to the first chapters, know that the answer is sure. Right? Of course he does. He just did, you know, on a bet. Right? Does God pervert justice? This, you know, again, what the book of Job brings to the fore far more than the other wisdom books is this question of justice. Proverbs and Ecclesiastes talk about it.
Yeah.
It's there. It's sort of part of the world order that Proverbs builds. Good things happen to good people. The righteous are rewarded. But, you know, Job sort of cuts away all of the other bits and pieces of wisdom literature and says, this is really, and I think this is the only question that really matters. The answer seems not to be as simple as anybody has ever suggested. And I think this is why the book is so popular, because it has this sort of built-in ambiguity of, boy, we'd really like it to be one way. You'd like the friends to be right.
Yeah.
But we know that they're not.
Yeah. Now, part of the dispute here is the friends are satisfied with the dogmas that have been established. Right. And Job says, don't tell me what must be the case. Give me actual evidence of what I have done.
Right.
And then when he replies to Bildad in chapter 9, he says, look, I know all this. How can a mortal be just before God? If one wished to contend with him, one couldn't answer him once in 1,000.
Right.
Now, remember this when we get to the end of the book, because it's going to be shown again. But Job says, yeah, I know that. But therefore, he says, though I am innocent, my own mouth would condemn me. I am blameless. I do not know myself. I loathe my life. It's all one. Therefore, I say, he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When disaster brings sudden death, he mocks at the calamity of the innocent. The earth is given into the hands of the wicked. If it is not he, who is it?
Yeah, it's an incredibly strong language. In a sense, right, if you think about Job in the context of sort of the broader wisdom conversation that's going on, right, he's appealing here to something more like a Ecclesiastes, right? Righteous, wicked. When God says enough, right, it's over and there's nothing you can do about it. But whereas Proverbs and Ecclesiastes feel like they are abstract, kind of conceptual, I learned something, here's my experiences, here's what you can learn. The sort of visceral, experiential sense of Job makes it such a more striking and difficult book to read. And what Job is really saying there to his friends who come in with that sort of conventional, look, we were all taught this, and this is the way things are. I mean, what he's really saying is, come talk to me when you're the one who's in my position, right? You can say those things, it's very nice, but I'm living this.
Yeah, and a lot of it is the tension between the dogma of how things are supposed to be and what you know to be actually the fact.
Yeah.
And so another of the things that he says to the friends is, would you speak falsely for God? This is in chapter 13. Will you speak falsely for God and speak deceitfully for him? Will you show partiality toward him? Will it be well with you when he searches you out, or can you deceive him as a person deceives another? Now, that's, I think, remarkable in two ways. On the one hand, the friends think they're being ultimately virtuous, that they are upholding justifying the ways of God to men. And Job says, that is lying for God. That's deceitful. Now, it seems to me there's an awful lot of theology down through the centuries that falls right under the banner of what the friends of Job are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing you really hear in that is how much of Job is understood, and this goes back to the figure of the Satan, how much of it is understood as essentially a lawsuit. Right?
Yes.
And some of the language there of sort of testifying, and would you go and sort of take God's side, or would you swear? And this language of again, it appeals to all of the conventions of is justice truly blind? But the idea that and we heard it in the reference also from chapter 9, right? How can a human testify, right? The whole thing is a setup, right? God is judge, jury, and executioner. Yeah. And the friends think that by sort of speaking on behalf of that authority figure that they're in the right. And I think Job is pointing out, look, that's actually a pretty safe play, right?
Yeah.
To go along with but
wouldn't be tolerated in any court of law.
Right.
Now, there's one famous passage in the book of Job where he briefly strikes what seems to be an optimistic note. This is in chapter 19. Oh, that my words were written down. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and that at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, then in my flesh I shall see God. Now,
so it's a particular kind of optimism.
It's a very corrupt Hebrew text, too, it should be said.
Yeah.
Famous, of course, because of Handel's Messiah.
Yep.
Who is this Redeemer who liveth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously, maybe not obviously. I think we need to separate it from, obvious Christian interpretation, and even I think any sort of broader eschatological
messianic expectation.
Right. Certainly
nothing
not that,
to do with that.
But it's not fully out of character for Job to say something like this. Part of the point of it is Job never quite loses his faith. Right, it's always there, even as he's struggling with it.
Yeah.
Right. If he couldn't say this, the book would end, to a certain extent. At the same time, right, something like "I know my Redeemer liveth" is balanced against, "Would that I were never born."
Yes, but does he think there is some person or being who is going to act as his Redeemer and vindicate him? Is it that clear what he's referring to?
No, I mean, I don't. Certainly, there's not some other, right? At the best, it's, God may change his mind.
I'm inclined to take it just as meaning the truth will out.
Yeah, no, I think that's
You know,
right.
that eventually I will be vindicated. And that saying that my Redeemer lives isn't actually referring to a particular being. It's just a kind of roundabout way of saying, I'll be vindicated in the end. And what it really testifies to is the strength of his conviction that he is innocent.
Right, which comes up elsewhere.
Yeah.
It comes up elsewhere in the book. I mean, that's something he simply never cracks on. Even to the point of, at times, being slightly obnoxious about it. You know, just repeating in the face of, and you know, he's not wrong. He has done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a heavy thing to keep falling back on.
The dialogues become a little bit repetitive.
Do you think so?
And one could actually skip about 10 chapters and not lose the thread of the argument.
Sure.
And then out of the blue in chapter 28, there is a poem. Surely there's a mine for silver and a place for gold, but where is wisdom to be found? And the answer that he has to that is, God only knows.
Exactly.
Essentially. God knows the way to it. Human beings don't.
Yeah.
Now that, in a way, is the contradicting everything that the whole wisdom tradition, both in Egypt and in Israel, had stood for.
Yeah.
Because the idea was that wisdom is accessible to human beings. And what Job says is, no, it's not. And when God found it, he said, I'll keep that.
Yeah.
For the rest of you, wisdom is fearing me.
Right. And again, that's very much raising the contrast between sort of theory of wisdom and the practicalities of lived life.
Yeah.
Right? You can talk all you like about how wisdom is to be found, but once you've lived part of it, Kohelet does some of the same thing. Once you've lived it, you realize there's no, you know, I can't learn the ways of the world by simply looking around. That point about where is wisdom found, only God has it, is not only a rebuke of the whole tradition, but a direct rebuke of the friends, right, who come in, you know, as even, you know, chapter upon chapter of we know what's best. We know what's best. And so with this, the book becomes not so much a self-righteous Job saying, no, I am good, and this is all wrong, and the friend saying, no, this is all correctly happening, you're not that good. But it becomes a contest between the friend saying, we know something about the way the world works, and Job saying, no one knows anything about the way the world works.
Yeah. Now, does he, though, still come off as a little bit self-righteous in chapters 29 to 31, when he is kind of his protestation of his innocence?
Yeah, I mean, he talks so much that at some point that's going to happen, right? In the same way that the friends talk so much that they eventually go from, you know, generally okay to just being sort of caricatures of themselves. Yeah, he's definitely self-righteous, but as the whole collection of this dialogue, what becomes, you know, sort of this philosophical debate about the nature of knowledge. You know, this whole epistemology of the big epistemological section of the Bible. It's really it's chapter upon chapter. It's very Platonic in the sense that you get this, you know, all of this going through all of these possibilities, but at the end you don't get, you know, nobody's declared the winner. What you have is sort of all the two poles of the conversation are laid out for us.
Yeah.
You can know things and it's like this. You can't know things and it's like this. You know, there's traditional wisdom, there's anti-traditional wisdom, and it goes on and on and on and circles back around. But then at the very end of the book, in the last sections, which is what we're going to turn to next, the whole conversation is essentially rendered moot.
Yes. Yeah. You know, up to this point, you could say this is a standoff.
Yeah.
This is an open-ended dialogue.
Yep.
But then when the voice comes out of the whirlwind, that this is not just one more volley in the exchange.
Right.